The reason why we call this press conference today is due to two disturbing statements that were said by the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, during a press conference that she held on December 1st, 2021. And I want to quote exactly what she said in order to make sure that we set the record straight and people that will be watching us will understand why we call this press conference and why we have the positions that we will have. So the first thing is, when Ursula was asked by a journalist, what is she thinking about the green certificate, the digital green certificate and the boosters? She said, and I quote, "This was a huge success," end quote. When the same journalist asked about the fact that these green certificates will be valid for 9 months, while the discussion was that actually the vaccines are valid 6 months, she said, and I quote, "There's a grace period of 3 months offered, granted by the European Commission to the people who are vaccinated to exercise their fundamental rights." So this is the first issue. Second issue, she was asked about the mandatory vaccination that we've seen right now being pushed all across Europe. And when she was asked about this, she said the following, and I quote, and the reason why I'm quoting is, again, to make sure that everything is on record and everybody will know what we'll be talking about. So she said, and I quote, "If you're asking me what my personal position is, we have this pandemic, we have to leave, we have the life-saving vaccines, but they have not been used adequately everywhere, and these cause an enormous health costs. If you look at the numbers, we have now 77% of the adults from the European Union vaccinated, or if you take the whole population, is 66%. This means 1/3 of European population is not vaccinated. There are 150 million people. This is a lot. Not each and everyone can be vaccinated. So there are very small children, for example, or people with special medical conditions. But the vast majority of people could. And therefore, I think it is understandable and appreciated to lead this discussion now. How can we encourage and potentially think about mandatory vaccination within the European Union? This needs discussion. This needs a common approach, but it is a discussion that I think has to be led, she said, end quote. So since she's asking for a discussion that should be led across the European Union, we took this privilege, I would say, and we answered her invitation to start this debate. So this is the reason why I'm calling my colleague Francesca Donata from Italy to present you her position about what the President of the Commission asked us to discuss about.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you, everybody. Good morning. I live in a country that is already implementing mandatory vaccination. In Italy, the government has introduced a mandatory vaccination for all workers in the health sector, for those in the school, university and job training sector, and for all workers in the army, police and firemen. All these workers are compelled to receive a complete vaccination against COVID-19 and booster doses to escape being placed on unpaid leave, regardless their immunity status. Having a strong natural immunity after recovery from the infection does not relieve anyone from the obligation when 6 months after the positive swab have passed. Moreover, even people with conditions that contraindicate vaccination are not exempted from the mandate, except for a few cases decided on the basis of an algorithm. Besides that, the government has just introduced an enhanced Green Pass, released only for vaccinated or recovered by 6 months, as requirement to access all restaurants, bars, cinemas, theatres and public events. It covers all people over 12 years. The basic Green Pass, instead, can be obtained even by paying COVID rapid tests, valid for 48 hours, and it's required to travel by all public transports, including local ones, to access all schools and universities, and to work in any public or private activity where vaccination is not mandatory. In my country, freedom of choice about personal medical treatments is denied, as people are blackmailed with losing their job or their freedom to travel or to study if they don't sign a consent to vaccination which is not free nor properly informed. Children over 12 now can't get on a bus and go to school if they're not vaccinated and their families can afford the cost of 3 tests a week or don't have a car to carry them along. Many teenagers are experimenting myocarditis, pericarditis, and several are dying for sudden heart attacks, cerebral hemorrhage, or unknown reasons while sleeping, just after the jab. Now they're starting to inject children aged 5 to 11, as the EMA and the Italian Medical Agency have authorized the use of Pfizer jabs, even on them, by a decision based on a 1,500 children trial and a follow-up of a few weeks. In other European countries, the situation is similar or even worse, like in Latvia, where unvaccinated members of the parliament are not allowed to have part in debates and to vote, or in Greece, where the government has proposed to fine with €100 every month all people over 60 if they will not get a shot. In Austria, there is a lockdown for the unvaccinated starting next week, and the draft law imposing mandatory vaccination for all people, including minors, with fines up to €7,200 or, alternatively, prison sentences up to 6 weeks for those who refuse. Last week, the President of the European Commission asked for a common approach in the EU to implement these measures in all countries. My reply is that the EU should reject all hypotheses of mandatory vaccination and discrimination of unvaccinated citizens, as the Council of Europe did in its resolution number 2361/21. On the contrary, supporting mandatory vaccinations, the EU would betray its fundamental principles and values of liberty, equality and protection of human rights. From that day on, being a member of the European Union would be a shame and a damnation for all democratic countries. Now the European Union has to make a choice. Will it keep being a democratic system or it won't? The Commission is open to turning authoritarian. We will see what the Council will decide. We are here to restore a union for freedom and human rights, not for shame. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll invite now to the floor our colleague from the Greens. He's from Lithuania, Stasys Jakeliūnas.
Thank you, Christian, and good morning, everyone. Now, some researchers, including medical researchers, call this pandemic PCR test pandemic. I agree with them, and I would add that this is also a pandemic of fear, because PCR tests are resulting in a number of cases, so-called COVID cases and COVID deaths, and this statistic is unreliable, confirmed by 3 statistical institutions in the European Union. Now, data, statistical data, and feeling of fear is manipulated to push all of us, including our children, into being vaccinated. Now, President von der Leyen called for mandatory, or discussion, I would be correct, for discussion on mandatory vaccination. But what we already have forced or coerced vaccination because of this manipulation of fear, data, and because of requirement to use COVID digital certificate. When asked to vaccinate, we are asked to trust in science. Now, what is science? I did some science myself years ago, but I remember what it is. First of all, it's a scientific debate, open scientific debate. Now, where is the scientific debate on vaccination and other COVID issues, including the PCR test, I don't see any. Why? Because it's blocked. It's blocked in most of the media, and it's even censored on the global scale by some global networks. Now, I was born in the USSR. Actually, I was expelled from my home country before I was born because my parents were political prisoners during the Stalinist regime, and they were sent far away from the home country. I lived in the Soviet Union prison with the censorship, with the control for 30 years. I didn't imagine that we would be moving again somehow to the environment of the censorship and to the environment of the control. I was myself censored by the global network 3 times. Why? Because I asked questions, I proposed some discussion, scientific discussion, I initiated some discussion myself, and it was blocked, it was censored. Now, Commission President Von der Leyen, I don't know if she is a victim of manipulation, data and fear manipulation, or is she manipulating herself? The scientists I trust and the data I analyze don't indicate that we need a vaccination for all, especially for children and young adults up to 50 years of age. There is no risk from this virus on a statistical basis to these age groups. Now, this censorship is quite dangerous because it's creeping into us, and if it continues to happen, I think we'll be living in something. We can call it global China, we can call it global Soviet Union, or we can call it global digital COVID land. Doesn't matter how we call it, but it's not a free world anymore. So we have to fight for the free world. We have to fight for our right to live in the free world and for our children's right to live in the free world. Thank you.
Thank you, Stasys. Christine?
Yes, good morning. Thanks again to all of you for your overwhelming support and encouragement you expressed to us in uncounted emails, private messages on social media. But please, do not consider me a hero. I'm not brave and I'm not courageous. I am simply doing my job. I was elected to Parliament to serve the people, to act on their behalf and in their best interest. And I couldn't think of a better way to serve your interest than to uphold freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. But I'm telling you, the vast majority of the elected representatives, they are selling you down the river. You know, instead of adjusting our concept of what constitutes fully vaxxed, we need to adjust our concept of what constitutes legitimate government. And governments forcing people into compliance are neither legitimate nor democratic by any stretch of the imagination. And it isn't about your health either. You know, pharmaceutical companies are about as interested in public health as the arms industry is in world peace. Now, some of you may argue I'm exaggerating. I'm misjudging the government's intentions. Granted, that is a possibility. But are you willing to take that risk? Can you afford this nonchalant attitude towards government, considering what we all stand to lose? Others may think, yeah, I kind of see where she's coming from, but nah, my government wouldn't do it. Well, not only would they, I'm telling you, they are already doing it as we speak. As Heraclit, a Greek philosopher living in the 5th century BC, once said, "The truth often evades being recognized due to its utter incredibility." So just because you cannot fathom your government having ill meanings towards you doesn't mean it is not true. And on the other hand, I'd much rather be wrong than sorry. But it's up to you. You need to decide what you will do. But keep in mind, whatever decision you do make, you will not only make it for yourself. This decision will be made for your children and your children's children as well. Your decision today will shape the society your children will have to live in. Your decision today will predetermine whether your children will live in a free and democratic society or if they will be subjected to a surveillancing police state. Now, I am determined to leave my children a free and democratic society, and this I will fight for tooth and nail. And should it be the last thing I do on this planet, so be it. So once again, dear government, bring it on. Let's see what you've got. I am not afraid of you. You will not be able to shut me up. You will not be able to force me into compliance. Oh, and one other thing, trying to buy me off, really? That isn't going to work either. So go ahead, offer me $1 million. Heck, make it $100 million. But you know what? Securing a future for my children in a free and democratic society, you could not possibly put a price tag on that.